Today, we're going to discuss inverse function. We've done discussing the rational function until problem solving. So this video will discuss inverse function. But before we can discuss the inverse function, we have to start with the one-to-one function first. So these are the objectives for today. You are going to, students or learners will be able to define one-to-one function and its inverse, model real-life situations involving one-to-one function, and finally, last one, we have to find, the students will be able to find the inverse of one-to-one function. So let's start with some pictures here that you have to tell me what is this picture. Yes, it's correct. This is DNA. So, bawat isang tao may equivalent na isang DNA. So, this is one of the example of one-to-one function. Okay? Each of the individual have an individual DNA also. Another example, we have our identification card or the ID number. Okay? The ID number of a particular person, of course, walang magkaparehong ID number. So, bawat isang tao, kapag may ID po siya, so, may equivalent na ID number yan. Okay? So, another one is the monogamous relationship. When we say monogamous relationship, bawat partner, ikaw ay para lang sa kanya at siya para lang sa'yo. So that is one-to-one function. When we are referring monogamous relationship, pwede yung example sa pagpapakasal sa Roman Catholic. So, yung lalaki para sa babae. Okay? So, we have one-to-one function. And there are a lot of real-life scenarios that you can tell me that is an example of a one-to-one function. Okay? Kahit na one family and in one house, that is one-to-one function also. So there's a lot of real-life scenarios that we can tell that there is a one-to-one function. Bakit? Ano pala ang one-to-one function? It is a function in which for each element of the domain, sa bawat element ng domain, it corresponds to a unique element of its range and vice versa. Ibig sabihin na si each element daw rin ng range mo ay may unique element din siya kay domain. So, both of the domain and the range has restriction. When we say has restriction, bawat isa sa kanila, dapat ang pair lang ay each other. So, si domain para kay range, si range para kay domain, isa-isa lang. So, hindi kagaya ng function na ang may restriction lang ay si domain. Kapag sinabi natin function, si domain ay bawal mayroon siyang magkaibang range. Dapat sa isang domain, isang output or isang range, yun ang kay function. Pero, pwede si range na may ibang domain. Pwedeng ulitin si range doon sa function. Pero ngayon, sa one-to-one function, si range dapat sa isang domain lang. Okay? Sa isang domain lang. At saka si domain, sa isang range lang din. For example, if we will have this in diagram form, let's check first the first figure. So we have here the diagram, -4 paired with -3, and -2 paired with -1, 0 paired with 1, 2 paired with 3, 4 paired with 5. So this is an example of one-to-one function. Ito siya. But if we're going to check here the second figure or the diagram here, we will check if -4 paired with 16. But if you're going to check, there is another domain na na-pair kay range na si 16. Therefore, it's not already a one-to-one function since the range 16 has two domains. But if you will ask the question if it is a function, therefore it's a function, but not a one-to-one function. Okay? Since the range 16 has two domains and the range 4 has also two domains. Okay? So, therefore, this is not a one-to-one function anymore. And another example of a one-to-one function in a form of ordered pair. So we have here sa taas, this is an example of a one-to-one function because if we're going to check, the domains are 2, 4, 11. And the range are 9, 6, 5. Wala talagang naulit sa domain at saka sa range. So ngayon, let's check kung kailan ba hindi pwedeng hindi na siya maging one-to-one function. If we're going to check 2, 4, 11, ito yung mga domains, pwede. Pero pagdating dito sa range 9, 5, 5, si 5 na range, dalawang beses na ulit. Therefore, it's not a one-to-one function anymore. Kasi nga, naulit si range pangalawang beses. Okay? So, I hope na naintindihan na kung ano ang kaibahan, kailan ba may one-to-one function at kailan ba merong restriction. Pag sa graph naman ang pag-usapan natin kapag sa graph naman ang pag-usapan natin, gagamit tayo ng horizontal line test para malaman natin na yung particular na graph ay one-to-one function ba siya. Okay? So, ano pala ang horizontal line test? Ito siya ang magsasabi na function or one-to-one function if and only if kapag paggawa mo ng horizontal line sa graph, mag-intersect once only. 1 point only. Kapag 1 point only, paggawa mo ng horizontal line test, therefore, that is a one-to-one function na graph. Okay, let's have an example so that you will better understand. So, using the horizontal line test, determine if each graph illustrates a one-to-one function. So, gagawa tayo ng horizontal line test para malaman natin if the graph is a one-to-one function or not. So, if I'm going to create a horizontal line test, okay, dito gumawa ako or dito gagawa rin ako, kung titingnan nyo class, bawat horizontal line test na nabuo ko, may dalawang parte ng graph na ito na na-touch ko. Therefore, this is not a one-to-one function. And then for the number 2, if I'm going to create a horizontal line, kahit ilang horizontal line ang i-create ko, bawat isang horizontal line ko mag-meet once only. Once lang niya matouch yung ating graph talaga. Therefore, it's a one-to-one function. See? Number 2. Kasi paggawa ko ng horizontal line test, once. Dito, twice. Number 3, if I'm going to create a horizontal line, many times niya na-touch yung graph. Therefore, it's not a one-to-one function. And for the number 4, if I'm going to create a horizontal line test, kahit saan dito sa graph ko, dito, once lang siya ma-meet or ma-touch ang graph. Therefore, it's a one-to-one function. So I hope that is clear with you, know how to identify or determine the graph using the vertical line, the horizontal line test rather. For the one-to-one function, we have the horizontal line test. And for the function only, we have the vertical line test. Pag sinabi nating horizontal line test, yun yung pahiga na line. And when we're talking about vertical line test, we're talking about yung patayo na line. Okay, so let's proceed. Ngayon, we are going to talk about the inverse function. Lahat ng function may inverse function. Pero, pag sinabi nating finding the inverse function of the one-to-one function, focus lang tayo dun sa one-to-one function kasi siya lang po ang may inverse function. Pero kapag when we are talking about domain and range lang na in table form or in diagram form, we can tell that there is an inverse form. Okay? But for the computation, of course, kailangan po one-to-one function lang siya. Okay? So this is for one-to-one function. Okay? Reversing the process performed by one-to-one function. Okay. Now, let's have an example if we're talking about the table form. So, to find the inverse of the following. Okay. When we say inverse, yung domain daw at saka range interchange when we are talking about inverse. That's why the inverse function of this table is this. Okay, sorry, nag-overlap na pala yung pagsulat ko. Okay, kung titingnan nyo dito, still X and Y, pero yung data ng X mo, siya yung range mo dito sa taas. At saka yung range mo dito sa inverse, siya yung domain mo sa taas. Again, we're talking about the inverse. So, interchange kung ano yung nasa domain, yun yung nasa range. Ano ba ang mga example kung saan may inverse? For example, you are going to tie your shoes because you are going to go to the mall. And then when you're going to go home, you have to untie your shoes. Or the lace pa, shoelace pala. You have to untie it para tanggalin yung shoes mo. Or the same manner, you're going to put on your shoes because you have to go out. And then when you are going to go, when you are home already rather, you have to remove your shoes. So, inverse. Okay? So, of course, the same manner as you have to open the door and close the door. Another thing, when we're talking about math, if you're going to add 10, the inverse of that is to subtract 10. And then if you're asked what is the inverse of subtracting 10, the inverse of that is to add 10. Now, if you are asked what is the inverse of multiply by 5, that is to divide by 5. And if you are asked to what is the inverse of divide by 5, means your answer multiply by 5. Okay? So that is inverse. So let's have an example on finding, okay? All right, the inverse na lang. Write the inverse function. The inverse of the following. Okay. What if in ordered pair form? Diba, nakita nyo kanina. When we're talking about inverse, sabi ko kanina that yung range nyo gawin yung domain. And yung domain mo, gawin mong range. Therefore, interchange lang sila. Ngayon, nauna si -3 kaysa kay -2. And then, negative 1 and negative 1 kasi same lang ang kanilang range and domain. And of course, we have interchange naman, si 1 maging 0, si 0 maging 1. Okay? So, yung 0 dito, nasa range na, and then si 1 nasa domain na. Same goes to 3, 1, and 5, 2. Okay? So, yung domains nyo sa taas na negative 2, nasa range na, so on and so forth. The same manner sa pangalawa, magiging negative 7, 0, negative 4, 1, and we have negative 1, 2, and also we have positive 2, 3, and we have 5, 4. And lastly, we have 8, 5. Okay, so ito yung inverse ng ordered pairs na binigay dito. Okay, I hope that you know already how to write the inverse of an ordered pair. Okay, just remember that you have to interchange the data of the domain to the data of your range. Okay, so let's have this. The task is to find the inverse of the one-to-one function. So if we're talking about the inverse of the one-to-one function, it is denoted with f raised to negative 1 of x. So read as inverse function. So sinabi kanina, interchange lang si y and x, x and y. Okay, so that is the definition of inverse function, and it is denoted by f raised to negative 1 of x. That means inverse function. So there are 4 steps in solving the inverse of one-to-one function class. We have first one, replace f of x by y. Next, interchange x and y. Then next one, solve for y in terms of x. And the last one is to replace y with the notation of inverse function. F raised to negative 1 of x. So let's have an example. We have 2 examples here. Meron tayong in a form of this and yung wala ng f of x. Automatically y na. So let's start with number 1. So we will follow the steps. Una daw, we have to interchange the f of x with y. So yung f of x maging y is equal to 4x minus 6. Okay? Minus 6. All right. So we have here, okay. Okay, so we have here, done na po tayo sa first step because we already changed the f of x with y. Ngayon, we have to proceed to step number 2. You have to interchange y and x. So that will become y as x is equal to 4x magiging 4y minus 6. The next step is we have to solve for y in terms of x. Therefore, lahat ng may variable na y, lipat natin sa left. And then lahat ng terms na nasa left na hindi walang y, lipat natin sa right. Therefore, yung positive 4y, lipat natin maging negative 4y. And then, yung x dito, lipat natin. Kasi y lang daw ang may terms lang daw na y ang ilagay natin sa left. Kasi we're looking for the y in terms of x. So, we have here, lipat natin sa kabila ang positive x, magiging negative x. Bring down lang natin si negative 6. Okay? Pero if we're going to check, your y still have the coefficient of negative 4. To remove that one, you have to divide both sides with negative 4. So, canceled. Ang negative 4, maiwan na lang si y is equal to negative x over negative 4 and negative 6 over negative 4. So, nilipat ko lang ang bawat terms. Ibig kasi sabihin na kapag both numerator may denominator na negative 4, so bawat term pala dito may negative 4 as denominator. So nilipat ko lang para malaman natin mamaya how to reduce it. Okay? So why now? Remember that negative x divided by with negative 4, negative sila, numerator and denominator, magiging positive x over 4 na sila. Ngayon, negative 6 over negative 4 din sila, negative, negative, therefore positive. But we can still reduce 6 and 4 with the divisor of 2. So 6 divide 2, 3, and 4 divide 2 is 2. So your answer now is y is equal to x over 4 plus 3 over 2. But since you are going to proceed with step number 4, or the last step, that you need to change the y with the inverse function na symbol. So we have here f raised to negative 1 of x. So inverse function is equal to x over 4 plus 3 over 2. So this is your final answer now for number 1. Okay? I hope that you followed the steps. Now, let's proceed to step number 2. Okay? Erase ko muna ito. Let's proceed to step number 2. If you're going to take a picture of the answer for this, we can have the next slide after I show you the process of how to find the inverse of number 2. So, meron siya dito. So, ipapakita ko yan mamaya para ma-screenshot ninyo during the watch or sa pagpanood nyo ng video na to. Okay? So, we have also here. Okay. Let's proceed to step number 2 solution. So again, you have to start with step number 1 to change the f of x with y. But if you're going to check here, wala na pong f of x. Pero may y na dito. Pero may coefficient pa siya. So, you have to directly proceed to step number 2. Okay, sulat muna natin. Yung 2x minus 5y is equal to 10. Step number 2 na tayo agad. You have to interchange x and y. So yung 2x magiging 2y minus 5y magiging 5x. So negative 5x or minus 5x is equal to 10. So interchange lang natin si x and si y. Ngayon, we are looking, the next step would be to find the new y in terms of x. So, iwan lang natin yung may variable na y na term. So, 2y. Lipat natin si negative 5x sa kabilang side. So, we have positive 5x. Bring down lang natin si positive 10. Okay? And then, since still yung y natin may coefficient pa, therefore, we have to divide both sides with positive 2, canceled, maiwan na lang is si y. Ngayon, since they have two terms sa numerator, pwede natin i-separate. Common denominator is 2. So, 5x over 2 plus. Remember that if we're going to separate 10 and over 2, meron pa tayong final na reduced form. Okay, so y now, since we cannot reduce the 5 and 2, as is lang po si 5x over 2, plus 10 over 2 is 5. Therefore, your final answer now for last step rather, is to change this one with the inverse function na notation. So we have here f raised to negative 1 of x is equal to 5x over 2 plus 5. So this is now your final answer for number 2. Okay? I hope that you really follow the steps so that you will be able to solve for to find the inverse of this particular one-to-one function given here. So your turn now is you have to answer this one. Okay, ito yung solution for number 1 kanina. Okay, you can take a picture of this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then for number 2, ito yung for number 2, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have also here, your task is to answer this one and submit it to me through Google Chat. Okay, you can also submit it through Messenger if you want. Okay, that would be all for this video lecture. And this would be the final, this would be the last topic of the inverse. No. Okay, ito yung last topic natin sa inverse. Okay, so that would be all. Thank you for listening.